Going.
Okay, welcome to the first episode of the Clutch Kick for 2019. I know I'm going to get that wrong a few times, just like writing the date down. I am one of your hosts, EG, and on the left or right of me is Greg. We might also get another host, maybe, just sort of seeing if they're going to dial in. But if not, we'll be, I guess, having a chat about drifting and starting to get into it, and I guess what you should prepare for, what we did, and what we suggest. So, as always, to begin with, well, actually, Happy New Year, because it's our first episode.
Yeah. Did you have a big one? I know you guys normally do some lamp inspections, but I think you guys have been out of action because somebody's got a whole bunch of broken cars.
Yeah, they're better now, but no, not a big break this time. Actually, very little. It took me a while to get one of my cars kind of running. I'm still having worries about temperature in the Silvia, but otherwise it seems to be running a lot better now. I still feel that there's a problem with the engine, but not sure what I'm going to do about it. I just don't have the money or the skill to repair it.
Have you done the water pump on the RB25 yet?
No, I haven't got around to that yet. It shouldn't take too long. I reckon I'm going to say I could knock it over in like 3 hours. But I need to buy a water pump.
Are you running thermo fans or a clutch fan on that?
Thermo fans. Yeah.
Oh, so that's pretty easy.
Well, actually, thermo fan, because the other one I had to pull apart because it didn't clear the power steering pump. And I thought I had a slimline fan, but I don't. I think I must have sold it.
Yeah, still not a massive job though.
No, it's not. No, but yeah, it should be pretty easy. The idea with RVs is to replace a few things while you're replacing the water pump, because the timing belt, it's easier for it to come off. You don't have to take it off because some people just sort of slide it away on the top and bottom of the pulleys. I think pulley. Yeah, I don't know what it's called. Anyway, just the ribbing, so they'll just slide it off and they won't lose the timing, and then pull the water pump off, slide it back in. But other people, say while you've got everything off, you should change the seals, change the bearing, either pulley or the bearing, and replace the timing belt as well, because everything has to come off.
You don't seem like much of a preventative maintenance type person though, so I doubt you'll do any of that and just slap a water pump on and off you go.
Well, see, I did that when I first got the car, and it hasn't done that many Ks. A lot of times passed.
Never been thrashed.
No, you're right. It's an RV.
And then I know New Year's, when I sent you some messages to wish you a New Year and suss out what you were doing for New Year's, you sound like you had a very eventful New Year's Eve.
Nah, not really. Just sitting in the car, just trying to figure out what wire goes where, because my Silvia has a S14 engine, a Japanese S14 engine in a Japanese non-turbo Silvia, which there doesn't seem to be any wiring diagrams around for that. Well, there used to be, but I can't find it anymore. Anytime I search the S14 to S13 SR conversion, it comes up with all the American ones, so they have KA and wiring diagrams, or they've got the CA wiring diagrams. I think they were more popular in Europe, maybe. And the pinouts I found out are the same, but for some reason my wiring is a little bit different in colors. So instead of being a black and something red wire, it's a brown wire. So, but the pinout's the same. But I was worried, so I had to go and check the pinouts. So It took
Just
me a long time to get running.
anything that's got to do with wiring cars is something that I just avoid and let somebody else deal with because, yeah, it's just a mess, really. So,
Yeah, but I can't afford to pay someone. Well, I don't want to afford to pay someone because that means I miss out on other things.
yeah, fair enough. That's fair.
So about yourself, I saw photos
Yeah,
from you. You were on the harbour in Sydney.
yeah, we ventured into the city. Yeah, I think that might be my last year of attempting to do that. We ended up in a pretty good spot, but we got lucky with timing, walking past a gate into a ticketed area and security being like, "Oh, we've got a crap load of space. Do you guys want to come in?" So we got
Oh
lucky and
wow!
we got lucky and we were sort of between the Hyatt that's at the Rocks and the overseas passenger terminal, like the cruise, uh, yeah, the dock there, sort of just off
I,
the side of it, Circular Quay. So
I thought someone sort of saw you and spotted you and said, "Oh look, there's that Olympic ice skater."
nah,
I
that's
said, "We got to get
nah, they're like,
him." And
oh,
then because
there's that wanker from that
you're
drifting talk show. And then I'm like, oh my god, is EG here? And they're like, nah, you.
uh, no, I reckon it was an Olympic thing.
Nah, you think so?
Yeah,
Ah,
they
okay.
recognise it.
So I guess not much news really. I think more stuff will come to light in the next couple of weeks. What I did see today with the D1NZ season kicking up in a couple of weeks is Cole Armstrong's car looks like it has a matching livery to Darren Kelly's factory back Nissan R35 GTR, and the four door R34 has now been done up in the same livery as Darren's. There were some hints towards them teaming up, but I wasn't sure it would team up, with all that the same sponsors, based off some stuff that they've been doing recently on social media and them sort of joining forces at Mad Mike's Summer Bash. But yeah, it looks like it's all but confirmed that they're teammates sharing sponsors now. So hopefully that's exciting times to come for those guys, and that maybe there might be another GTR in the build, or maybe it's just them sharing resources and using Nissan money to and Nismo money over in New Zealand to sort of make their lives a little bit easier between the two of them, probably putting cars on same transporter or something like that, just to cut down on those, I guess, the logistical headaches that is sort of traveling around New Zealand. As uh, if anybody's ever seen pictures or anything from over there, the guys are sort of, when it's local, they'll travel on multiple car trailers with car trailers full of tires and things like that between teams. And then when they do the longer trips, they seem to try and get transporters and put a few cars on it for the longer hauls. And a few of the guys or the slightly bigger teams that are 3 or 4 cars sort of travel together on designated transporters. So it's exciting to see those guys with that. It was also announced that Kengushi is going over for Leadfoot Festival. That was announced just a couple of weeks ago, and the Jenkins boys are building another GT86 on behalf of Toyota's Glore over there, and yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't think they've got much turnover time to build a third GT86, but yeah, they've got help from Toyota over there. So I don't know. It's exciting to know that there's two manufacturers heavily involved with the series over there, and yeah, it's going to take somebody here doing something special, I would imagine, for Nissan to get involved with an Australian drifting. But now that Nissan money's been untied a little bit with the V8 supercar program going away, but I would imagine that's being reinvested into GT racing or something like that. But hey, you never know
Could be.
if anybody wants to get in and actually do some hard yard work. There's an open spot there because Kelly Racing no longer is factory backed by Nissan. So get in and see if they've got some money for your drift program.
What would you drift though? Because I'm guessing that they'd want you to drive something that's current, like
Yeah, but
currently sell.
yeah, you'd be trying to do a. I would imagine you'd be trying to do a 370Z, or well, a 370Z still current. They're still bringing out
Are they
different.
still selling those?
Yeah, and still different editions of them. There was some new
Oh
ones done.
wow.
And then or a 35 GTR. But both have off-the-shelf lock kits and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
so not a difficult way to go, but yeah, be interesting to see if anybody was to ever pursue Nissan in Australia. But most will probably just sit back and hope that it will land in their lap. But yeah, well done to Cole for being able to jump on board with Darren and that being a team. So yeah, the new D1 NZ season I think 2 weeks away or a week and a half away now. And Matty Hill's I think our lone Australian at this stage going over to take it to them in the yellow car that he drove at World Time Attack. Not the same car he drove last year. That's still over in Japan. And then this weekend, Summer Nats. I'm sure EG will be down there getting his tits out for the boys.
I still haven't decided if I'm going to go yet because the ticket price apparently has gone down for Saturday, but it's still $90 for just a day, and it's plus you have to add parking and all the other
Mate, it's Canberra.
costs inside the venue. I wish I could, but it's actually on the other side of Canberra.
You get your mum to drop you down.
I'm still waiting for a free entry. If anyone's got one, I just don't want to pay $90.
That's like to all the guys running demos.
Yeah, I don't know if they get
a pit pass or anything.
Additional. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Jake's saying not worth the sunburn, but come on, mate, drifting is on. Have you seen the new sort of burnout alley thing?
Yeah. So that's
like Tough Street will cruise through it partly or something like that, and there's like a 45-meter stretch that looks fairly narrow, but it's fenced, like got safety catch fences and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, they used to have burnouts, even though the organisers didn't really like it. There was always burnouts happening on Tough Street, but I think trying to stop them didn't really work. So that's why they organised some barriers, I guess, because even it's just that sort of big chunky mesh fencing. So if you had something small, I think it'd still get flicked up. But I guess it'll stop things like big wheels or big chunks of tire, or people sort of jumping in front of the car.
Has there been incidences of that previously though?
Yeah, see, there has. One of my friends got hit by a tire valve, and actually he got a big blood blister right on his forehead. And he didn't really care. He just walked around with this blood blister saying, "Oh, check it out, this guy doing this massive skid." And then it's like, and then you look at it, it's like almost like half a head growing on the top of his forehead because there's such a massive blood blister. And he didn't care because he was partly drunk and he was just sort of into it. But I can see, it can be dangerous. But if you look at it and you can tell shit's gone. It's getting crazy. Something could happen. You just walk away if you're really worried. Otherwise, you just stand there and you're baking in danger.
Yeah, and I guess one of the big major changes that happened over the years too was the fact that cars were probably only pumping out into the 400 to 500 horsepower range. Yeah, I guess there were cars with some big blowers and stuff like that, but yeah, it's gone a little bit more crazy, and you probably find there's more and more cars with that sort of, more and more power, and we've seen some work that gets done on drift cars, like especially those guys from down in Canberra, so I'd imagine that some of those cruise cars probably have some dodgy stuff done to them too, so...
No, those cars in Summernuts recently, those things are really neat.
No, 100%, like there's some, definitely majority are neat, but that's not to say that for some of them it's not a little bit of shoddy stuff going on too, so...
Yeah, the scrutiny is really look over the cars though. They're getting really strict. And people still, it doesn't. Even you can only put in so much safety, but then at some point you're gonna have to take the cars away, which is what's the point?
Yeah, exactly.
So you can only do so much, and those cars always had lots of power. Like there's always shit cars. There was always high power cars, and yeah, there was. Have you actually been down to Sumnats before?
Nah, as Jake said, it's not worth the sunburn, so not that interested.
It's. I think it's an interesting experience every time, because I've spoken to people overseas who've heard about it, and they've come and checked it out, and they said shit's wild. And then I said, "Oh, when did you come?" And they said, a couple of years ago. I'm like, "Wow, it's like so much tamer these days than what it used to be like 15 years ago." And but they said, yeah, it was absolutely nuts. But yeah, they just compared because because we live. So Jake, myself, well, actually Jake doesn't even live in Canberra anymore, but we grew up here, and yeah, going to Simon Nats a long time ago is so different. Like it feels so tame these days.
Yeah, but I guess when you've been at it during its peak and its wildest, even it being a little bit more tame seems like it's taken a massive step back. Where for anybody who's used to having tea at the local cafe, it's gonna seem pretty wild. So
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. You got to come and check it out one time before it goes. Like, I think eventually they'll just be shut down. They'll be like, no, there's been someone broke their ankle. Actually, something.
the dude died because he fell out the back of a ute when they were cruising around.
Yeah, so I don't even get that.
Yeah, like that to me is just a bit.
You can almost.
That's natural selection.
Yeah, but you can. It's one of those things where it's bad, but it could also happen if you just sort of tripped over something and you just sort of hit head in the right way, which it's bad that it happened, but the sort of same thing could happen in that situation as well. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't there. I just heard about it.
I'll probably wait for a year where it cools down, and it's cool at this time of the year. You're saying that your place is stinking hot, and Sydney's been consistently in the 30s and barely getting into the 20s overnight. So,
it's crazy hot at the moment. I think it feels like it's been the hottest it's been in the last sort of 3 years. Maybe four, maybe. It's been really hot.
all right, we have Steve on. I don't know if we can hear him, but he's on and his face is on. So there we go.
Hey, it sounds better. Let me just rearrange this.
But yeah, so we've got some. There's drift demos on down there, so maybe one year when I come down to visit, it'll be because Peter's let me bring the 350 once it's back up and running down for drift demos. So
I'm actually keen to see where they're going to run that. Actually, I'm not sure where.
It's out the scrutineering sheds, and there's a little car park out the side of it or something like that.
So just like little figure eights and things like that.
Yeah, I think they're launching from inside the shed. So
all I can imagine is like they come out, they use a shed as a run up. They come out, they do a loop, like a hairpin, and then they do like a little loop and come back into the shed.
Yeah, or a full donut sort of thing, and then down the side of the shed, or if there's, I don't know if there's doors down the side of it, but I guess we'll know in a day or two's time.
Yeah, things kick off tomorrow.
Yeah.
I don't even know. I don't know if there's going to be event stuff on, or if it's still scrutineering, because they were doing scrutineering yesterday. I think they started yesterday.
They kicked that stuff off earlier than I would think, but I guess there's probably hundreds of cars, so got to start it early if they do it properly. So I guess we'll get on to our topic. Surprisingly, we have a lot of people who listen to the show that actually don't even drift or are just getting into it and sort of stumbled across the show while looking to get involved or just being interested in the scene, or have been involved in the scene but haven't necessarily gone out to an event and actually driven yet. So we figured while it's still quiet time in the year and things are starting to wait to ramp up, and we sort of use our guests around more relevant events for them, we'd have a chat about first of all sort of getting involved with your track days and where to sort of begin, and then if we get into a little bit sort of basic car setup stuff or cars to sort of look at that we each individually think are worthwhile sort of getting into and a good place to start. And uh, we've all had pretty, oh, I guess the two other guys have had similar upbringings within drifting, I guess. Steve probably the longest of any of us, but then different ways of getting involved and different ways of honing and maintaining our sort of our drifting. So all states in Australia currently, or except for the ACT, run drift events. Your best place to look is on Facebook. There are organisations in all states, but sort of if we move north to south, uh, in the Northern Territory, you've got TEDA, your Top End Drift Association. They're on Facebook. They run all events in the Northern Territory. They run uh, events on both the main track at Hidden Valley and in the pit area at Hidden Valley. So they've got a bit of a skid pan there. Then over in WA, you've got two organisations. You've got D1WA, and I think it's WA Drifting or something like that. And they run mostly out of Barbagallo. They run events in the car, like in the pit area there as well. So it's a big skid pan, as well as running events out at Collie. So have a look on Facebook for those guys. Queensland, fairly lucky. Weekly events at Archerfield Drift Park. If you have a look at them, they run events weekly. Currently not. They'll be back up in Feb. But yeah, you always get Thursday nights there, and then Tuesdays and weekend events throughout the year. But again, check out on Facebook. QR will hold plenty of events there, so keep an eye on that as well. Down into New South Wales, we have lots of organisations. You can sort of hit tracks from Coffs Harbour, totally separate to any of the organisations. You can sort of show up there and drive a lot of the time. Keep an eye on what is it, Rally Drift Complex. Then Port Macquarie is also holding its own events now, but it's sort of, I think in some ways, better off jumping in with some of the events that go on up there, run by some of the other organisations. And then down in Sydney, you've got Australian Drift Club, Driving Sports, and Revolution Motorsport all run different drift events and are a good place to have a look online. I know from personal experience in New South Wales, and I guess you guys would agree with me on it, that don't get caught up with just one. Always keep an eye on events from different organisers in your state, because often you'll think that there's nothing on and then realise that there's a whole bunch of events that have happened in between events from another organiser. Like if you're in New South Wales and just looking at Revolution Motorsport, you'll think there's only one drift event in New South Wales every 3 or 4 months, and then all of a sudden you've missed that there's been 2 Matsuris at Rally, an event at 3 or 4 open events at Port Macquarie, a whole bunch of figure 8 and wet pan events have all gone down, and you're like, oh, I've missed out on so much. So yeah, keep doing research and keep following. There tends to be more events on than what you realise, especially if you're only following one group. As you head further south in Victoria, basically everything's run under Vic Drift, and there are a few private days that go on down in Victoria. So I think if you get involved in the scene down there, you'll find out more about the private days, and I think even those private days are a little bit more open when they need numbers, so definitely worth having a look at. But Vic Drift would be your main source down there. In South Australia now, Drifting SA is sort of taken over, well, has involvement with both the tracks down there, and keep an eye on their page. And then down in Tassie, I think it's Drifting Tas, as well as DCA has involvement with the driving down there. So they've got a couple of tracks down there. Keep an eye on both DCA page and on Drifting Tassie, because yeah, always running events. I think that's where most people get caught up, is within their state. I don't know if I don't think any of the states other than maybe maybe Northern Territory only have the single organization that sort of has total run of it. Everything I've seen from Northern Territory is only run by TETA, but everywhere else has sort of open track days and sort of private events run by other organizers. So yeah, I think definitely if you're new and looking to get into it, keeping up to date mostly with Facebook is fairly important to know that there's actually events going on. I think also finding friends within the scene so that if you're struggling to find information, as long as you're not one of those people, the people that kill me the most is you look in the comments on the discussion of a Facebook event, what date is this on? What time does it start? And all that information's in the buddy about section.
The event post, yeah.
How often do you see that?
Just like trying to tell as well. It's exactly the same thing.
So rather than typing in there, have a quick look at some of that info. One of the places I missed in SA, JDMX Park is open every weekend for drifting. So I guess the next step with it is once you've found those organizations, one of the big factors is licensing. You don't need to sit an exam or anything for any of the licenses, but uh, for most venues you'll need one of 3 licenses. If you're in a place like New South Wales, you probably get stuck buying 2 or 3 of them for sure. Events will either be run under CAMS, and sometimes a AASA event will recognise a CAMS license, but I think they're starting to sort of pull back on that. So potentially need a AASA license depending on what insurance the club is running under, or you're looking at or you're looking at racers in insurance. If you're in Queensland, racer is pretty much all you'll ever need because QR is racer, and anything that's sort of a DCA drift event, if it's running under not under Archerfield's insurance, will run under racer. And then as you sort of move into other places, you're stuck with different tracks being affiliated with different insurance companies. So don't get too frustrated by it. But if you can get day licenses for most of them. But if you think you're going to stick with one club and they sort of stick with one insurance company, you're pretty much home and hosed, and you can get lucky and only have to pay 1 year membership at a time with that organization. But I think most of us have probably got. I think I've got CAMS and Racer currently. I've avoided AASA, I think, because I'm able to use my CAMS for most of it. And then some of your other venues, you don't need any sort of license, which is basically they call it a license, but it's just you're insured by that company. JDMX Park and Archerfield run under separate. I don't think. Oh, JDMX Park might even be under CAMS or AASA. Don't quote me on that one, but Archerfield,
Rally used to run their own as well, actually.
Who did?
They've changed to CAMS now, but Rally used to run their own insurance as well.
Yeah, I don't even know if because when I ran Rally there, they didn't ask to see my other insurance, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, that's definitely something you need to do some research into, and most of the time it's cheaper and easier to sign up for that insurance before you show up to the track. I actually like the way Racer does theirs now. You download the app, you do your login, and that's your license. CAMS, they either don't send them out sometimes or they go missing in the mail, because my 2017 one never showed up, and I don't know if that was somebody just stealing credit cards. But then my 2018 one showed up, so yeah.
You mean your license itself?
Yeah, like the actual hard copy of the license.
Yeah, I've had that before. I have not received a license that I paid for, but when you log into the CAMS website, it says your license.
Yeah, so you're pretty much covered. So being confirmed, Rally is under their own insurance. So don't if you're looking at if you're insuring your brand new, not brand new, but brand new to you 200SX or something like that, just be careful that when you call Shannon's and they're like, oh, you're affiliated with CAMS, you get a 10% discount or whatever, that you just don't run out and grab that sort of insurance because it might not be relevant at all to where you are in the country. As I said, some tracks will accept cams, so like WASA at one stage was accepting cams licenses, but I don't think they're doing it as much anymore. So yeah, just you got to be a little bit more savvy and sort of understand when they're asking what sort of license you've got, that it is for insurance purposes only, and it just covers you basically covers you if you end up in a vegetated state or that sort of stuff on track. It doesn't cover the fact that you've written off your car, or um, that EG's run into your rear bar and tore it in half. Is not going to pay for that. But if you do end up really messed up in an accident, it'll at least get you to hospital and a few other things. I don't think it gives you a huge amount, but the government generally still looks after you with that. But yeah, that's
I think the payouts are in that manual that they send out, because I looked at it. It's not very much.
Yeah, it's pretty
especially
crappy.
with the lower licenses. I think you get, if you lose a digit, then you get like $500 or $1,000. If you lose a limb, then you get $2,000 or something, and that's it. It's really not very much for the low level licenses.
Yeah, so in that case, don't get messed up.
Don't get hurt.
Yeah, that's it. But yeah, so
it's unlikely with drifting. So I don't think,
provided
besides that
you got your hand hanging out the door, bashing on your door as some idiot T-bones you, or your passengers doing that sort of thing. I think that's why their big thing is a lot of the time now is windows up for passengers and things like that.
Yeah. I guess the most severe sort of thing that I've heard, besides some of the stuff overseas, is just sort of people have been sort of knocked around and kind of knocked out, like they've hit the helmet with the window, and that's about it. But I haven't really heard of anything that severe where they've lost a limb, or they've well, no one's died in Australia from drifting, which is good.
Well, you don't need to pay out if you're dead,
so yeah, so that's good. Yeah, I think it goes to your family for other things, but that's all right.
Yeah,
anyway,
mine would just celebrate anyway.
They just sort of throw you out the backyard. Might even cover you with a bit of dirt. That's it.
The seagulls will come. Just cover me in chips. So yeah, that'll be your next thing. Will be, once you've found an event, will just be knowing what sort of license that you should have for the event itself. It's fairly easy and a straightforward process. It's literally you're just signing your life away. It's nothing too exciting other than that. And then it's making a choice on, well, if you've already got a car, just having your basics. A lot of things run under AASA now. All cams are expecting half cages, or a minimum of a half cage if you're gonna tandem with factory side intrusion. And when we say factory side intrusion, a lot of people don't understand that if you've bought a car not as a race car from Japan, it may have come in with no door bar at all, because I'm pretty sure in Japan they're sold with some of their chassis are sold with no bar inside the door, right?
Yeah, and A6.
Yeah, see,
A6 didn't come with door bars either.
Yeah, I don't know if the S13s or S14s came with no side intrusion in the doors.
Well, I know that they talk about them having to be welded in when they arrive in Australia, but if you're buying something from overseas, if it's been complied in Australia, then it's going to have some form of structural bar through the door. That they take a pretty good hit. Like my S14 had some hits, and the door holds up really well in shape. It's not a big deal, but that's why there's an emphasis on saying if there's factory door bars in there. But it's not something I think they've ever checked, and with them wanting you to run door cards, it's how do you check that there's a...
For some reason, everyone seems to want... It's one of the first things everyone wants to take you out. They go, I want to save weight, so I'm going to pull these door bars out. And I'm just like, that seems a bit... I don't know.
But it's amazing how much...
Getting older, like...
No, but it's amazing how much structure they actually hold, though. as well. Like not even like in a big hit, but even in like a hit where one of your mates is running your door, it actually makes the door hold a pretty good shape. Where if somebody just even puts a wheel tap on you, it's going to cave the door. So yeah, for some of your places, definitely Vic Drift. If you want to run tandems at a Revolution Motorsport Day in New South Wales, I would imagine it's the same. I'm pretty sure it's the same deal down in when we spoke to Michael a few weeks ago. They were having issues in South Australia because it was a rule but wasn't enforced about half cages and tandems. So it's becoming the norm now, and there's lots of companies selling off-the-shelf half cages ready to bolt in, like AGI in New South Wales, and I know there's some guys down in Victoria who do similar sort of work. So just be savvy to it and find out what other people are running in your state, and yeah, jump on that, because even as peace of mind, something as simple as a half cage makes it a lot easier and a lot safer to run harnesses. Just gives you that peace of mind. So I'm a bit of a fan for harnesses, particularly for passengers, because the factory, at least when you're driving and you're taking little bumps, you're sort of holding yourself in the seat, but passengers are just getting thrown around. So
I think it's because they sit so far back, because I usually push the seat forward for them, so the legs are touching
the firewall.
their feet are touching the firewall, so then they can hold themselves in a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah, see, my old S14 would have just melted the passengers' feet to the floor at that stage, so I normally had the seat as far back as I could get it, hoping that they wouldn't have their feet against the dump. But yeah, so for a lot of places now, at least a half cage for any proper track work, at a minimum for doing tandems or passenger runs. So if you want to show your mates how fully hectic you are, then you're definitely looking at needing a half cage. And AGI's half cage is around $800, and some of them will need a little bit of welding done for plates into floors and stuff. But look, reality is you should be no more into it than $800 to $1,200, and you're done with a half cage.
Generally, because we're talking about beginners here, like you're starting off, should.
But somewhere like
events,
Vic Drift, you need it no matter what to get on
track. Yeah, Vic Drift, I think, which is I'm sort of against. Like, I think you can.
But there's we're talking
that
just
risk in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just.
That's what their insurance is asked for. We're not going to argue with that, but just some places it's an expectation.
It is Victoria, but no.
But just be savvy to the fact that you might need it, and not be upset that
you might need it. You might need it, but
just like you don't need it for street lamp inspection, so just don't.
No, it's not. No, so the idea is, if you find an event that doesn't have to have it, you don't need to get it.
Yeah.
So this isn't a minimum sort of thing where if you want to go drifting on a track, you need to have a half gauge. If the rules don't say, like, if the requirements isn't there, then you don't need to have that to actually go drifting. You can go drifting without a cage. Seatbelt, yes, you do need a seatbelt for a few different reasons.
Yeah, Damien.
I think it's pretty important to note that if you don't have a cage and you're gonna go out there, don't go, full ham, because you're only surrounded by like 2 or 3 mil of steel rather than anything else. Like, take your time, work up to it, and if don't go flat out without a cage. I don't reckon anyway.
So even down in SA drift skills, you don't need it, and if you're in Group D or Class D of a Vic Drift event, then I'm guessing that means they space cars out a whole bunch and have limited number of cars on track. So even in Vic Drift, you can get away with no cage to start with, but just know that if you want to progress, probably within the first 12 months, it's going to be an investment you'll be looking at pretty much anywhere in the country, really. But at least you can sort of get in and get a taste of what you want before you decide to make that investment. And then it's
forget, this isn't just the thing, just so people don't take it as gospel. You don't need a cage to go drifting.
No. check your regs. Like there are some places that that you definitely will need it, and I'm pretty sure Teeter is one of them because they run under cams. But the rules might be a little bit relaxed, and it's definitely best to hit up the event organisers and find out. But yeah, I would say most places within the first 12 months or so, if you're looking to then progress and start tandeming, that you're gonna sort of be forced in it. Queensland, you can get away with no cage everywhere in tandem. Just you can't run passengers and tandem in a QR. So there's some weird funky rules out there, but you sort of learn the lay of the land with what you've got locally, and then work from there. And then if you are looking at traveling interstate and you're super comfortable with your regulations at your track or your event, make sure you suss out and check what's to go with the
Well,
other
there are a
events.
couple of little things as well. Like, I think Cam's took it off the requirements, but fire extinguishers. Always should have a fire extinguisher, I reckon. And secondary bonnet latches as well. Even for streetcars, they're making people put secondary, like just a strap around your bonnet.
Yeah, a lot of that ended up going because your factory one does have a secondary where if but it's peace of mind because uh, a strap like that you can make up yourself from Bunnings, or putting latches on is maybe a $50 to $100 investment where um, you forget to put your bonnet down or a latch breaks, you're looking at $500 for a new windscreen, plus the bonnet, plus potentially the massive dent in your roof if your bonnet's longer than your windscreen. So, and it's at any track days that we've seen, you'd probably there'd be at least 2 or 3 within a year for sure that it happens to. So yeah, it's still definitely something worthwhile. Uh, if you've got a fiberglass one, probably not so bad, but at that stage you've probably put in two hood pins anyway. But on your factory one, if a metal bonnet comes up, it's going to do a fair whack of damage. So um, and I think one of you boys has had to drive. Oh no, one of your mates has had to drive back to Canberra after having a bonnet flip up back in the day in
That
a
is a long time ago.
Yeah.
You're talking about us with the 31.
yeah, and kicking out
Yeah.
3 windscreens and stuff.
Yeah, so he did that, smashed the front one out, so he had to kick the front screen out and then kick the rear screen out.
Yeah,
then
that's
drive.
before he knew how to take it out properly. Because he could have taken it out. If I knew what I knew now, then I just cut the rear windscreen out. I wouldn't actually kick it out. But yeah, I remember smashing it because it was. What did he do? We were at Pheasant's Nest and we got fuel. And I think he checked oil level and he forgot to put the bonnet back down properly, and then he took off. No, he had pins in it. He didn't put the pins in. That's right. Yeah.
And then he was driving it back from the track that night, and it was pretty cold, so he was driving with his suit and his.
No, it was the next. No, it was the next day.
Because I remember him saying it was cold. He was saying it was super cold.
Yeah, no.
So he had to wear it.
Yeah, had to wear a helmet. He stopped because he had a trailer as well. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, he used to take all the tires with him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had a trailer, and then we stayed separate places that night, and then trying to I sort of said, hey, I'm heading back home, and he's like, oh shit, I gotta wire the trailer, and then I gotta figure out how to get home because it's raining, and then I think he actually drove home with a helmet on in his car down the highway. Yeah.
So yeah, just think about things like your secondary bonnet restraints, or just making sure that your bonnets are latching properly. Then your other basics for getting on track is secure seat, secure steering wheel, at least a factory seat belt. If you don't have a proper harness bar, then I would be just running a factory seat belt. But yeah, ideally a harness bar or a half cage so you can run proper harnesses. But if not, the other thing to be careful of is if you put a bucket seat in, not a reclinable bucket, but if you put a fixed back bucket seat, if it's got big side bolstering, your factory seat belt is not going to touch you, and it's not going to lock properly. Like after I just put I put my big Halo seat in the S14 when it was still street driven, just after I got it for my track days, just to see what it'd do, and I did the harnesses to the
feed it through the holes in the bolsters?
Could,
It was really
but
dumb.
yeah, it's still not. I don't
It's
know.
not great.
Nah,
Not
it's
great.
not great, and it's basically just a lap belt at that stage. But yeah, the guys told me, oh, there's too much angle to, or the metal that I had it going into wasn't right, or something like that. So for my harnesses, so I end up having to
Wait.
use the factory seatbelt, and it wasn't touching me. I probably had like 80 mil of space between me and the top of the seat and the seatbelt not touching me. So just keep in mind that sort of thing, because at that stage you're just not locked in properly. So, but hey,
Yeah.
that's what they told me to go out and track with. But I thought that was pretty
I
sketchy.
Yeah, I think it's because you must have put. Did you bolt in your harness to the factory seatbelt holes?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
that what you did?
yeah,
Yeah. So yeah, that's the problem. Is the angles are all wrong.
yeah.
If something happens, yeah, you'll actually hurt yourself. And people are even saying that 4-point harnesses are really bad anyway, because you still it still pushes you down too much from your shoulders when you have a particular type of hit. It doesn't actually hold you in. But yeah, so your issue was not having. It wasn't because you didn't have a harness bar. It's because the angles were
Yeah,
wrong
were
with the seatbelt. Yeah, but I've got mine so they sit as high as they can on the car floor at the back. So it's like near where the boot is. So then the angle isn't that severe. It should be whatever the CAM's like specified degree. I don't know. It's in the manual what the allowable tolerance is, and most of the time the factory seatbelt mounting points to the wrong spot.
Yeah, and yeah, the more horizontal I think they can be, the better, really. It also comes down to
Right. Something before you even start modifying stuff, before you take it to a track as well. There's just your basic maintenance.
well,
Like
that's
the amount of guys that go.
yeah.
No, it's you might laugh about it, but the amount of people that go without checking their fluids, checking for leaks, checking all that
Well,
sort of
and that's
stuff.
what I was going to say, is your leaks is one of your big things, really. Like, they are looking for them, and especially if it's leaking at the top and they can already see it, then most places you're not going to get on track straight away.
Yeah, but I mean, it's stuff like if you have a slight leak in the coolant hose, you do cook your cars when you're drifting. So a slight leak's going to turn into a worse leak, and then you're not only going to wreck it for yourself, you're going to wreck it for everyone else, because they got to go out and then clean your coolant leak all over the track as well, things like that. So yeah, before you modify everything, make sure it's all up to scratch in the first place.
Yeah.
I usually try and make sure the car feels like a car. So even, some people, they say, oh, I've got a problem with the suspension being all funny, and they go, oh yeah, what I'll do is I'll just put coilovers in and knuckles in and caster rods all at the same time, and then they get in and the car still doesn't feel right. It's because they might not have identified the problem yet. So make it start feeling sort of normalish, and then start modifying the car, make big changes. So that's what I think with that. But going before you modify it, like you can go to a drift day with like an almost standard car.
Well,
if it's roadworthy, yeah,
you can go with a standard car.
Yeah.
As long as everything's secure, like that's what I guess we're trying to get to, is that the car doesn't need to be anything more than factory, but it's got to basically be not immaculate like it left the factory floor, but it left the factory floor. In regards to no leaks, all your lights are working. You've got a secure seat. Your steering wheel's secure. There's nothing inside the car that's going to fly around and hit anybody. You can go out and drive it at basically in any state on track, but as long as it meets those requirements, and then that you have an ADR approved helmet. You can go higher spec than that, but man, I guess while we're on the topic of helmets, we might stick with it for a little bit. But when you're looking at buying a helmet, you can get $60 helmets. They do the job, but yeah, but it comes down to that sort of thing, how much value you put on your head, and then your things like your motorbike helmets are a plastic inside. They're designed so that if you're thrown off a bike and the bike catches on fire, well, you're not going to be near the bike anyway, so that stuff's not going to melt to your face. But if you're using them inside a car and the car catches on fire and you're still inside, they're they're all plastic, nylon, padding, so that stuff will melt to your face. But at least you won't have a cracked skull at that stage, hopefully. But then as you sort of move into your motorsport helmets, they're designed for, they're fire retardant and things like that. So that's sort of
the
Lights as well.
harms attachments and
yeah,
other things.
and all that sort
yeah.
of and all that sort of gear as you sort of move up and for in some countries and some places they're becoming requirement to use them on certain speed tracks and in certain competitions and all that. But in saying that, if you just want to get out on track and give it a try, yeah, you can use a fairly cheap helmet. If you're doing something like wet pan at Sydney Motorsport Park or just a drift skills day at Vic Drift, a cheap open face or closed face helmet is enough to get you on track. And if the layout that they're using, or if you're at the skid pan at Winton and there's nothing really to hit, then there's not really too much to worry about. The most damage you might do is do one of those, when you're first learning, especially if they've wet the surface and you end up in one of those massive spins that just sort of whips the absolute living crap out of you, and you get thrown a little bit more sideways than you normally would in a dry spin. You might hit your head on your B pillar or something like that, but generally it's nothing too significant. I'm not a fan of open face helmets. I know they use them at drift school in a few places when you're able to chat to your mates, but especially after seeing Blake's little incident at Wakefield where he's blown his front bar off and then it's gone underneath the car and then spat up and then hit himself in the face.
Yeah, that was funny.
Honestly, if you're driving with windows down,
Man, that was unlucky. That's
yeah,
unlucky.
but it's just any shit like that, especially when you're getting flicked by rocks from the car in front or anything like that. I don't
Do
know.
you have your visor down though?
I'm saying an open face. Oh, what, do I
Yeah,
have
but
my
still, like,
if I've got windows, if I've got windows
Yeah.
down, I'm always visor down. Honestly, I don't like
Okay.
dust and crap in my eyes. I'm like a visor down all the time unless the windows are up.
and my visor's normally up until that starts happening. Then I go like this and flick it down.
2 hands on the wheel, mate.
Nah, you're right. No, I'm pro.
Are you an open face or a closed face person, Steve?
It depends. If I'm doing anything competitive, it's closed faced.
Yeah.
Actually, even most of the practice stuff is all closed faced. But if it's super hot, I will go open face as well.
Actually,
I got
you got a good point there. Yeah, because when I did the comps, I closed it because I didn't want to go through and close it during the run.
Reason why, sorry?
That's a good point. So if it was during a comp, I'd usually have it closed as well, so I wouldn't have to mess with it. That's a good point.
Just one less thing you got to worry about. There's nothing worse than copping an eye full of dust halfway through a corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Connor said that he's got an open face, but it's got a visor. But you can get helmets like that are sort of will have a visor, or I don't know what they're classified as, but you've got your rally helmets that have the microphone inbuilt to a part of the helmet that comes around the face. I know FD started introducing a closed-faced helmet rule, but
You still get dust.
yeah,
Those open face ones, the visor, I'm sure you'd still get more dust.
No, you still get
come up.
dust. No, you
Yeah.
still get.
Yeah.
It's just less of that sort of direct rocks
hit,
or yeah. So you still get dust that comes up, but it's you can only do so much to secure that cavity before there's no air running
Well,
into it.
Speaking of that, I actually have a forced air helmet, which is fantastic for that. It's also a good way to keep your head cool as well.
Have you got a filter?
I have a filter for it as well.
Oh, okay, all right. So yeah, that's probably.
but he's also can't afford to drift, so
Nah.
Yeah, and I can't actually remember the last time that Steve drifted as well on track.
You've got.
at all.
Yeah, I think you've got a video of me drifting the last time.
That's why I added on track.
well, I think the last time on a proper track was him crashing your 32 into walls at Mount Gambier, so
Was he drifting or just crashing?
probably just crashing. think it's
Hang on.
I think it's a Canberra thing.
The teaching counts, doesn't it?
Hey?
Teaching counts, doesn't it?
Kind of, maybe.
Oh,
So,
yeah, I haven't seen that.
so
I'll
that
look out.
so that's your basic requirements, and yeah, look, you can pick up cheap helmets from most of your motorcycle accessory shops or online. Um,
Just make sure they fit well and they're comfortable. And the only thing is, I don't like when they're heavy.
well,
So
it doesn't matter what you like. We're talking how you get on track to start with. So just have a
yeah,
feel
but
with some of those
It's
things.
got
No.
the ADR tick on the back. You're sweet.
yeah,
So it's a good place to get started. If you're lucky and you've got somewhere like your drift skills down in Vic Drift, Archerfield had training nights, but they've also got some quiet days. Sydney's a little bit harder. Uh, if there's somewhere you can take your car out to one of their basic days and get a feel for doing donuts and that sort of stuff in your own vehicle, or you've got a track with a small skid pan like Simmons Plains in Tassie. Uh, New South Wales were a little bit deprived with that sort of thing. Most of our basic drift days, you end up with
you,
three or four other cars, and it's a bit of a mess. But
Canberra actually has uh, that sort of thing, like a drift training experience day where you take your own car, and as a company that does that here. Um,
That.
so it's kind of expensive. So the sort of what you pay.
are you using your own car or using
Yeah,
somebody else's?
use your own car. So you bring your own car. The requirements, just pretty much roadworthy car. It has to have rego, and the skid pan is very limited. So you'd go around the skid pan course and that's it.
Yeah.
And sometimes they actually narrow it down because the facility owner or manager believes that skidding causes damage to the track. So you're sometimes restricted to the middle of the track only, which is. But they have something here in ACT, which I don't think there's. It sounds
The
like
thing is that they've actually got some really cool tracks and facilities there that we're not allowed to use.
Yeah, so go find your own.
like that Sutton Road driver training actually has a really cool road course, and then just down the road there's also the police driver training course as well. They're both actually really cool courses.
The police one's
really
twice the size now.
Yeah.
I think from when you went on it, because you went on it about 12 years ago or 15 years ago.
No, I never went on the police one. I went on the driver training one and Sutton though.
Okay. No, I know someone that did, because they used to hold like a hill climb type of event there a long time ago. I thought you did it, but it must have been someone else. But it's gotten twice the size since that, because I think they've poured a lot more money into the police force down here.
No, what you mean is that the police have been sort of gaining more stuff from victims of crime and just selling it off, and now they've got more money to spend on their own facilities. But yeah, in some places you're limited and aren't able to take your car out for really basic drift training, and in some of your other states you're lucky and you're able to take your cars out. So have a look, see what sort of days are out there, speak to your local organisers and find out if there is those sort of days. For me, because I learnt to drive on the computer and with a background in sport, you pick up your pace as you go, and you sort of get a feel for it. And I was able to get a few rides with people at different days before I went out and drifted, and you sort of get that feel for what the car should feel like underneath you. But you sort of chucked in the deep end a little bit in the Sydney region with not having much of an opportunity to get a feel for the car in basic donuts and things like that. But if you don't have that sort of luxury in your state, pretty much every state currently has some form of drift school or drift tutorial going on in their own cars, and if you've never actually done any form of skid, or done some, some naughty experimenting in a cul-de-sac somewhere, it to me it's at least doing the first basic round of that is highly advisable, and you end up with guys like Steve with years of experience, giving you tuition. There's on track up at QR. There's Drift School Australia in New South Wales. Um, there's Peter with Drift Cadet in Victoria. There's going to be a drift school at the Bend, Run Under Drifting SA. Ken, who we had early in our episodes last year, runs Drift School WA. I'm not sure about Northern Territory, and then when you sort of look up into Northern Queensland and stuff like that, they don't have anything, but they've got, I would imagine you've got your sort of skid pan set up in Northern Territory, and in Tassie, there's plenty of back roads to go drive fairly quiet. Plus, they've got a nice little skid pan, and the skid pan's a little bit more self-regulating down there. It seems if you were to tell the guys, oh, can you give me a couple of minutes just to go out there and try some donuts, the skid pan's only a small one, and the guys are sort of more than willing to help out with that. So, but yeah, if you've never done any sort of drift, or want to get some basics, even if you've already got your own car, I think, yeah, as expensive as they are, and Steve, you can probably give us a rough price on what Drift School Australia is probably one of your more expensive ones, being New South Wales, and everything in New South Wales is more expensive. But I think a basic day is, I think
I think start around the $500 mark.
Yeah, $500 or $600. So, and then
go about 800.
yeah,
Yeah.
So that's car supplied. You just show up and drive, and all those drift schools that I went through, that's the case, car supplied. So just getting a feel for it, it's sort of one of your best places to start. If you've already got a car and you're already an enthusiast, then yeah, some of those other driver training days where you're able to use your own car, but there's some helping hands, and they're sort of for your beginner guys. That's sort of
It's cheaper than I thought, actually. Sorry, it's only $200 for the starter one, 400 for the middle, and then
is the 200 just
the top one.
the through a ride experience though?
No, that's the intro. So
Okay.
It is a pretty basic course, but it still gives you the basics of car control on that one. So
yeah, and honestly, at $200, just to get a feel for what a car feels like to be skidding underneath you without having to run the risk of losing demerit points or doing anything crazy like that. And again, just getting tips from people who know what they're doing, and even if the guy who's instructing you doesn't have lots and lots of years of experience, it's um, I'm pretty sure you guys are given a brief by the organisers, right, as to what you're supposed to be teaching and all that sort of stuff. So it's not like you're going into an unstructured lesson, you're going into a structured lesson. So yeah, definitely worth having a look at that sort of thing as well before you get too involved, because as I said, a lot of the places it's sort of like you've shown up with a car, go out and drift, go give it a try, and without getting some basic understanding and a little bit of help with that, if you haven't watched Drift Bible on YouTube or done any of that stuff, then it's always good to get a helping hand with some of that. Plus watch in-car.
the big thing about that as well is when you do go to those events, if you end up going to that, is that 90% of the people are going to be more than happy to talk to you and help you out anyway. Like most of the drift people in the community are pretty friendly and happy to help. Sort of, yeah, all you need to do is just ask them.
Yeah, and it's also looking. So if you do get, for me, figure eight is one of the better examples. I remember in my first 12 months of driving, Matty Hill had just finished his first S15, and he was out there, and I jumped in behind him and tried to follow him around a little bit. And it's just, for me, even going to a new track, I struggle. I don't come from a street drifting background. I come from a PC background driving simulators. So if I go in too hot and put it into a wall, I press escape, press restart, go back to the pits, drive out and try it again. Where the guys who come from a street drifting background tend to pick up tracks a lot quicker because they don't get to press reset. but when I follow somebody on a track, after that I'm pretty much set. And if you jump out behind
I don't know
somebody,
about AG, but there was a couple of times I wish I could have pressed reset on some of my practice sessions.
I'm sure, but probably
Fun.
had to press it less times than some of the dudes who are trying on trying on things like Assetto Corsa and Live for Speed and things like that. Um, so yeah, jumping in behind somebody. Look, if you can find somebody with a similar powered car or similar grip to your car and sort of follow in behind them, at a safe distance and get a feel for what they're doing, or even again jump in with somebody or do a couple of laps yourself, see if somebody's able to take you for some passenger runs and then jump back in your own car again. Uh, when I did demos at
Game actually get someone, if you trust them, to steer your car for you. Because I learned a lot when I had someone jump in my car. You shut up, Ethan.
everybody's gonna be too scared to do anything because AG's a dick. Well,
I just give them the keys to my car and they can just crash it again and again and again.
Well, see, I've done plenty of driving on Figure 8. I've done heaps of driving on Figure 8, a little bit of Wakefield and a bit of Drift School, and then did demos at one of the events that Drift School runs, and the track was completely different to what they normally run, and it was a lot smaller. And I ended up backing the car into a wall fairly heavily on a small donut, and I broke the dump. So at that stage, my day was over. I didn't feel like setting the car on fire. But then I jumped in with, it was the first time I'd met Blake, and I jumped in with Blake, and he was driving his JZX. I guess it was just a street car, and the amount of handbrake he was using, I was like, this is where I messed up, because I hadn't had to do super super tight donuts like that before that required a whole lot of handbrake to chase somebody. And when I hit the wall, I was chasing somebody, but I didn't want to do a whole lot of like clutch dump and reload on the handbrake, and it was just something I'd never done before, even with the amount of laps that I had done on Figure 8 and at Drift School. And jumping in with Blake, I realised how aggressive he was on the handbrake and on the clutch to do what he was doing. And it's just an eye opener to jump in with somebody, though.
I think you have to be careful with that because it's when you're chasing someone, you do whatever you can to get you in that right spot. It's not so much. I think if the roles were reversed,
yeah, but you're talking as somebody with a whole lot of experience. Like I hit the wall chasing somebody. When I'm in on a lead run, I'm fine. You do whatever you do to maintain a drift. But when you're trying to maintain a drift and then dealing with, on a tight course like we were running, but it's just even just getting a feel for it and seeing the sort of things that he was doing to make up for the space that he had and on the layout that we had. It just sort of teaches you to look for what was different to what you were doing to what he was doing for me. So
yeah, but it's as a beginner, I think it'd be difficult for you to pick up. Like you'd watch something, like even still, when I watch a really high level driver, like someone that's been drifting twice as long as I have and drifting well, I just don't understand how that they're, like I can see what they're doing, but I don't understand how they're doing it.
I can't keep up with some of them. When I see some of the top end drivers, like some of the stuff, some of their movements and reactions are just that quick, and you're just like, holy shit! All right.
So, as a beginner, I think it's good to get in the car and see like a basic run, but not so much a complicated run when you're chasing, because that's not really what a beginner.
No, of course, but it's just we're talking
required to do.
Yeah, I'm talking more in general, just the fact that you can learn so much from even just from watching. But again, if you're jumping in with somebody and you're like, I'm struggling to link a lap of this track, the person who's helping you is going to dumb it down right down to basics. At the last Wakefield day, I jumped in with one of the guys who used to have, a V8 drift car and just used to rely on the torque to do everything in a big handbrake drag. And he's in a much smaller Laggia RB20 car now, and had no idea, and the handbrake wasn't working, and wasn't sure on sort of how to approach getting that to drive compared to what he was used to in the past. And at that stage, I was just basically talking him through the basics of getting it to go around the track and not having to worry so much about the handbrake and things like that, where you become reliant on a few things like that. I think when everything's working really well, you feel great in the car, but then as soon as one little thing goes, like your handbrake, that you sort of it's all over for you. So I think if somebody's if you're looking for help from somebody, if the person can dumb it right back down for you and talk to you like it's you're at the beginning again, they're the sort of people that if somebody gives you advice and you don't understand it, tell them you don't understand it. I teach on a daily basis, and when somebody looks at you and they look puzzled as hell, you know that it's got to be said again in a different way. But a lot of people will be like, "Oh yeah, I get you," and it's like you just know that information hasn't been received. So ask for
Yeah.
more help, or ask for it to be said in a different way, and you'll find that you'll very quickly get a handle um, of doing it. And if you're a beginner and you feel like you're doing everything right and you're just totally struggling, then yeah, definitely, as Steve said, get somebody else to jump in the car and try and drive it. And if somebody who's, people are telling you as a good driver is struggling to drive your car, they're going to be able to give you feedback and tell you if your car's set up completely wrong and is a total bucket.
Actually, I actually had that experience with Jojo's car. Like a friend of ours, when he first started driving, he had a Sprinter, and he did all the right things like suspension and all that sort of stuff, and he couldn't get a handle of it. We're watching him, and we're going, we don't know why he's spinning out. Then we've jumped into the car, like I've jumped into it, and it was the weirdest thing to drive, because what had happened, you get to about, say, I don't know, 20 to 25 degrees of lock. Anything past that, the thing would loop. Doesn't matter how fast you chase the wheel or whatever you did, it'd drift sweet up to that angle and then just loop. Didn't matter what happened. I think later on he found out that it had a skyline diff that was chopped down funny and wasn't done equally. So it was giving the rear end some funny geometry as it moved around. But yeah, he thought it was him until he let some other people drive it.
And nobody could do it.
Yeah.
It was hard.
And then he jumped into my car, and he was like a natural straight off the bat. He jumped in my H6, and he just threw it around Wakefield, no problem.
Yeah.
But there's definitely something wrong with my one.
But your car's balanced, and that's what I think some of the problem is with some people's setups is the balance is wrong. Like I get sometimes you'll set a car up for more or like your preference, but if you're starting out, you want a balanced car. So anyone could get into it, and it's easy to drive. So that's why I think, because when I drove Steve's car, his car was balanced. The only thing I didn't like about it was the driving position, but my size and Steve's size we're quite different. But Jojo's car was really bad. I could only get like 15 to 20 degrees before it actually spun, and it spun on the spot too. It wouldn't actually it wouldn't be a big arc. It'd just be like, it will just send you around.
So it's more like the rear was on caster wheels or something like that, and just totally pivoted around the front end.
You drove it as well.
Yeah, I drove it around as well, and then I couldn't pick it. Like, it was such a weird thing. It's almost like the pivot point was like at the back, like a mid rear, because it reminded me of an MR2 drifting. So an MR2, you kind of had to like throw the steering wheel earlier than what you needed, and then you had to put it on lock a lot more again as it was going, which is it's really weird, and such a weird sort of instinct to put on lock early and then more as it came on, and then you couldn't do like a huge amount of angle. So it kind of felt like an MR2, but it wasn't. It was, because the MR2's engine and the weight's at the back, whereas an 86, the engine and the weight sort of should be like just behind the engine. That's where it should be pivoting. Yeah, really bizarre.
So yeah, if you are looking for somewhere to jump in your car because you are a little bit worried about it feeling a little bit funny, do have a look at what other guys are driving and if they can string together laps, or if you've been around for a little while and done a couple of days, you might get to know some guys. But yeah, have a look at what the guys are actually driving, and then what their driving is like before you decide to let let somebody just jump in and drive your car, because there are some dudes that will claim that they're really awesome at it, but then just go do crazy shit in your car. And then you look at some guys who have really crappy cars like or crappy looking cars like your red stage boys, and when you tell them to not kill your car too badly, they don't run into stuff. They drive it hard, but they don't run into stuff where you'd expect them to want to run into stuff. But so don't judge a book by its cover with that, but just have a look at the level of driving from that person before you let them jump in and take your car for laps, because they've told you in the pits that, oh, I saw you struggling, and you know you're missing a LS in the front or something like that. So
And a tube front as well, I think.
yeah, it sounds like the goer. I think that's what all the Curse boys are moving towards this season anyway.
Tube front.
Tube front and LSs.
I forgot you need the WhatsApp too.
So
Yeah.
so that's your basics if you've already got your car and getting into your drift events and things like that. If you haven't got a car yet and you're starting to look at getting into it, your basics, and somebody in the comments is going to have a whinge, but start with a rear-wheel drive car.
Hey, we did an episode about drift cars last year.
Yeah.
So we covered, because if you want more in depth, then there's probably more coverage in that episode. So you, I guess, go back and listen to that, but it'd be more brief.
Yeah.
So, but I think in that episode, I said drift whatever car you like, as long as it's more like a car.
A Joule has just proposed that I really, really want to see.
Sorry?
That?
A Joule has just been proposed that I want to see. I think Jai has just called out Connor for. Have I read that right?
Yeah, I think so.
In the comment.
Well, Jai's not going to call me out for a Joule because I already beat him.
I don't know who. Did.
So you tell everybody that you're a better driver than Jai.
But yeah, pick something that's rear drive and within your means. And if it's already got some modifications and it's at the right price, then jump on it, because it'll save you a little bit moving forward, because you're not paying retail on parts.
I think rear drive would make it easier.
Just get a fucking rear drive.
Have you ever driven front wheel drive or drifted front wheel drive or all wheel drive?
Yeah, I had my Honda Fit in the States that I used to throw around in the snow.
Oh, whatever. Have you got videos?
No.
It doesn't count if it's not a video.
Oh, it did happen.
We used to.
It didn't happen.
I remember after
you can make up all these stories.
I remember after one event at our local, like the rink we were training at in Detroit, and everybody had left except for one of the guys who had rented a car and driven down from a Czech guy had driven down from Toronto to do the show, and I was still in the car park, and there was probably 2 inches of snow on the ground, and we probably spent like a good half an hour to an hour just throwing it around, and I think a couple of times we went close to curbs and light poles, but no, that was good times.
Were you actually drifting, or did you just have the handbrake up?
No, you get speed and then throw it in, and then use the handbrake to sort of modulate speed a little bit, and you drive around with it on. I don't want a bloody flat spot my tires.
No, I don't think it's happened.
No.
I think it's just someone else's story that someone told you, and you're just retelling it.
You're a dick. So yes, all-wheel drive. Nah, I don't even know if I've driven an all-wheel drive car, other than like as an all-wheel drive car. Yeah, I don't think I've driven one.
I was gonna say car, not like a truck or.
No. As like a sports car or something. I don't think I have.
An Evo Golf's full drive.
No, let's not talk about that sort of car.
Rex, whatever. Rex, Evos.
No.
No.
I don't think so. No.
We used to rally drive at Tercel. That was pretty cool.
Then you blew it up, didn't you?
No, it sat out the front of the parents' house until it got towed away.
That's sad. Those things are cool. They're like a huge wagon. They're four-wheel drive. Well, they're slow as all hell.
No, it was only like a little Corolla thing.
Yeah, no, it's like the roof was like massive. Like I remember sitting on one, and like the roof was tall. It was really roomy inside.
The driving style that you needed for that was really interesting. Like it was all commitment. Like more so, like you had to really throw it in hard, keep it pinned. There was no counter steer. It was more just literally pointed the wheels. Like he only used maybe half a turn of lock because he wanted to try and keep the wheels as straight as possible to keep you going around the corner.
It was more like a rally style, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where you line up for the shoot out. So
That's it. Yeah.
And you try and keep as much. The fastest would be the longer you can, or the earlier and longer you can keep your foot pinned. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the style of thing that we want to see from Greg's new car.
Keeping it pinned. Yeah.
Yeah.
Once we get it running, or it runs. Once we get it driving. Yeah. It hasn't been touched in a few weeks, so there's no updates. I guess from your guys' personal experience, would you say that you improve faster as a driver with, not the bigger the bucket, the faster you improve, but sort of the more basic the car is to start with, and then jumping into something better? Okay, within its limits, I'm not talking being able to go and jump straight into a car with, 265 semis and that sort of thing, but just, do you feel like the more basic you start with, the more of a handle you get on just trying to make the drift work, and then you get into a tighter car and you tend to be a better driver?
Definitely. Like my Sprinter, I drifted that when it was bog stock. Like it had 4AC in it, everything, 5-inch high suspension. Took that to Wakefield with an open diff and just learned how to drive it that way. You sort of learn a lot about sort of grip levels, momentum, weight transfer. Just using, rather than just relying on power, just using the momentum of the car to really get to go do what you want it to do. I sort of built my one reverse to what everyone does. I kept the 4AC in it for ages. I went suspension and wheels first with 4AC, and then went up through the engines after I had the chassis sorted in it. So I think that sort of helped with my skill and learning curve for that.
Yeah.
EG had on Cello, which I think you did something similar with.
No, I didn't. I was the complete opposite route because I came from the advice of people who I thought were drifting or into drifting, but I didn't know because I was getting into cars, or like playing with cars, and then assume these guys know what they're talking about, and they didn't, but they just sort of gave me advice. They said I have to get a drift type car, which isn't, is like a Silvia or an RX-7 or a Skyline, is limited to those sort of things, like a drift car. So I went down the power route. Besides, sort of, I did do the basic sort of change the springs, change the shocks, but then I went for the engine power because that's what I was told is you need power to go drifting. But knowing what I know now and how I improved after I stopped listening to those guys, it's really hard because you just sort of, when you're starting off and you've got zero knowledge, you kind of sort of ask questions and then you don't know who's giving you the right information or who's giving you the wrong information. So these guys, I just sort of, from my judgment, I thought they knew what they were doing because they had Silvias and then or Skylines, and they've been to track days, so I just assumed that they knew. But because they're, what they say sounds like they've got the credentials to have the knowledge, but anyway, it was the wrong sort of information, and it took me longer. And I'm the type of person that I don't have any talent; I just practice a lot. So I went to Oran Park pretty much every month. So I did that for 12 months, and then sometimes I went twice because I had other events on, and it took me like a whole year just to be able to link two slides together, because I could always get the step out, but I couldn't get one to connect to the other very nicely. It'd be like a pause, or it'd be like really awkward, and then yeah, and then as soon as it clicked, I realized what I was doing. Then yeah, it was about a year it took me to actually get there. But I went down the power route, which I don't think is the right thing. I think your car should be balanced. It should feel like a car. Ideally, it's easier in a rear-wheel drive car. And then lots of practice. That's what I recommend. There's a few sort of things I think you should do with the car. So a working clutch and a working diff. So something that gives you a bit of resistance with the diff would be nice, because it's more predictable. Because I can still drift with an open diff, but it's more steering work. Yeah, it's more steering work and sort of handbrake sometimes. And, it's not impossible, but it's definitely a lot better when certain things work in a certain way.
But even saying that, if
a 1.5 way as well. Like I've been drifting with a locker for years, but I had a 1.5 way, but it wasn't strong enough for the V6. But the difference in turn in from a locker from a 1.5 way diff was massive. Like I had to change my entry style heaps to sort of drive around the locker. And yeah, 1.5 way is the way to go, I think.
But even in saying that, if you've got an open diff and it's, there's a track event coming up and you just want to have a go at it, go drive it once and then go put your LSD, or not the cheap LSD that people are getting at festivals at the moment, but put a proper LSD or a welder diff or a shimmed factory diff, or something that makes both wheels turn at the same time. But yeah, when I got the 350, it was an LSD that was opening up a little bit, and having a welder diff. And I don't think I've ever actually I don't even know if I've ever drifted a welder diff until I had the 350 at Wakefield. But yeah, I think an LSD is definitely a way to go. But if you want to go cheap spec, then any form of locker is good. But even your shim diff, at least there's a little bit of give in it. But yeah, I feel like I'm going to have to change the way I drive a little bit with the weldy compared to driving even with the two-way from the S14. So, but don't avoid.
When we talk about LSDs, it's not the viscous one, because that's kind of wears out really quickly.
But you can shim them up to be super tight and basically act like a locker with just like a bee's give, really. And it's a cheap way to get it happening. It's cheaper and easier than even doing a weldy if you've already got a VLSD in the car. It's your torsion diffs and stuff like that that you
start. I've heard of trying lockers, like Lockerites, and that sounds like a horrible idea if you've ever driven one of them. They're more for four-wheel drives and stuff, but they're literally just a big dog engagement style.
I've heard about that.
Is that that's the same as your that's your Detroit lockers and things like that too, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah. And I can just see that snapping axles at the sudden torque.
Especially when you're clutching, yeah.
But not even that, but as soon as it's offload and it's fully open, it's not even like a gradual open up, it just snaps to open, so...
That's, literally it.
I think they can actually, if there's enough of a speed difference, they can not lock as well. Like, I think they skim over each other, don't they?
Yeah. It's just like a dog box, I guess. You can't sort of ram a dog box home if the speeds are too different.
Look, don't avoid track days because you have an open diff. If you can get out there, particularly in the wet, just go out and drive and then make that change and feel what the change is from that to the next. In saying what we said earlier, if you do have a pretty specced out car to start with, look, I'm not talking go full blown retarded, but if you've got something that is relatively specced out to start with, you just need more and more seat time. And I think if you do jump into something basic, you will be able to string laps together, but you're probably looking at a little bit longer time than doing it in the reverse. But in saying that, I started in a 14 with a shim diff and coilovers and no other modifications other than that. A shorter diff ratio. That was my drift car for the first 12 months of me driving. So pretty sorted chassis when it came to having coilovers and adjustable arms in the back and a lock diff, but everything else was very basic. But I was on a pretty basic track to get around, so I didn't need big speed and wasn't huge commitment. So definitely not a bad place to start. But yeah, and I think there's been more and more sort of Commodores and things like that popping up in the last little while that people are starting to use. And if you're gonna, I know we spoke about it on the picking a car episode, but if you're looking at picking a car, pick something that you can get some support for if you're a fabricator that you can do work to. Even your Commodores and stuff now, there's guys called Showtime that do lock kits and stuff like that for your Commodores. And I think one of the guys out at North Circuit on the weekend was driving a VY Ute that all he had was a off-the-shelf lock kit, and a locker in the back.
There's actually a place up in Queensland called AU House, and they're winding out heaps of new products this new year as well, which is actually going to be kind of interesting to see.
Is that David Stankowski, or is it separate?
I think he's involved.
I think he plays with those guys, but I don't think it's his company. But they're actually expanding past AUs. They're doing stuff for ELs and BAs and stuff like that now. They're sort of trying to take on the whole Falcon drift scene.
Nice.
Which I'm actually looking forward to. For what I've seen with Stankowski's car, like they have half an idea of how to do stuff properly. So
this information upsets Greg because Greg's a Commodore/Holden fanboy.
Yeah, but it's the Showtime guys who do Commodore stuff that looks like it works pretty well. So, as one of the New South Wales guys just said, don't go street land inspecting in the wet. Go to the wet pan. Guys who go out on wet nights because they're tight asses to try and save tyres sort of blows my mind a little bit, because the street's the wrong place for a wet pan session, because the roads are so unpredictable, and them being crowned to help water flow away, covered in diesel in most of the places where people are going to do skids and stuff like that. It's just the reality is on some of those nights you probably could be pinned in fourth gear and going maybe 3 kilometers an hour, and that's not really drifting. Like, you're just doing a massive power skid almost on the spot, and then you're basically gonna, like driving on ice, and just gonna push the car into a gutter or something like that. If you're gonna go do street lamp inspections, go do it in the dry.
You should. I did do a fair bit of stuff in the wet, if I'm being honest.
What's that?
Like back in the day, me and EG used to have the Bureau of Meteorology on our computers most of the time, like watching the rain coming through and going, oh yes.
You can't tell me that wasn't some of the sketchiest driving you've ever done.
I don't know, EG. I don't think it was that bad.
No, I think our safety margin is quite good.
I remember some of the courses that you used to show me that weren't.
Yeah, okay. I remember those.
Some of those are a little bit hairy, but yeah.
Yeah, those, and I wouldn't recommend that to most people. Even like some of the pros that I've met, I don't think I would recommend. It could be quite. The consequences could be really bad.
But if you're learning, you would say, a big open wet space is not a bad place to learn. But if you're looking for predictability to learn to drive, then the dry really is the the place to learn to do your basics. Really, most of the places that are making you train in the wet is purely from a financial point of
Yeah,
view
well,
and a
it's
wear
really
and
hard
tear.
because the cost is can be quite severe, and even for a place like Australia, we don't have that much facilities. It's compared to the amount of land we have, and how spread out we are. Like I can understand people going to like a really very like far away open sort of cul-de-sac with absolutely no one around, no chance of traffic without you sort of seeing. Then I could see you sort of getting a feel for oversteer. But otherwise, doing it in like a really public or open area just asks for trouble.
Oh yeah,
Or something.
yeah.
Not considering the environment, not considering other people. I think because you could be affecting someone really bad. Like if you were just sort of doing it, like some of these guys I've seen on Facebook, they've during the middle of the day they've gone out to like a pretty busy industrial area and they've just sort of dropped a skid there, and they haven't even sort of scoped it out.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a bit of a different situation to what we're talking. I think that's where people have got to identify. There was that one recently at Buddy Taran Point where the guy in that RX-7 was leaving the workshop and dumped it down the street, lost control, and put it underneath the back of a under the back of a truck. Like there's all that sort of stuff, and I think
the throttle cable snapped.
So the
you
throttle
on or something.
and you can't put your you just wait. There's this wonderful thing in manual cars. It's called a clutch, and like when you put your foot on the clutch, it disengages the throttle. Or even if you feather it, like you can almost act like the car is still like
And the key on to accessory.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. I'd just put my foot on the clutch and then I can still steer the bloody thing. But yeah, some of those excuses after you do a fair bit of track work and have some sketchy things happen, are complete bullshit. So.
I still think wet weather driving skills is still something that shouldn't be sort of given, forgotten about, because the amount of pro level drivers that as soon as the track gets slightly damp, it's just like they're back on your average skid pan day. It could be any driver in one of those skid pan sessions. They're just going straight off the track or just going super tame, super easy. Whereas you've seen the drivers that sort of go out whenever they can. They like Nakamura at Time Attack in the wet was just as fast as when he was in the dry. It was actually really cool to watch. But
that was cheap tires too. But that's what happens when you that's what happens when you strap the 285s on. But look, I'm not saying don't go out in the wet. I'm saying we're talking about where to get started. If you can sort of step into the dry as early as possible just to get a feel for your basic car control, it'll do wonders for getting your basic controls. And then all condition driving, because if you decide to compete, the mother of the nature doesn't really give a shit that there's a drift event on that weekend. If it's gonna decide to take a crap on you, you got to learn to drive it. Okay. Recently there was an event on, and I was surprised at, I can't remember where we were at, and one of the guys who had been around for a while in the scene goes to me, I've never drifted in the wet before. Like, he'd just never ended up at a wet drift day before, and I was just like, Jesus Christ, like, you sort of expect these guys who have been around a long time to have been sort of, been in all sorts of situations, but yeah, there are dudes who have been around a long time and haven't managed to get through all conditions. So yeah, of course, like, don't avoid a drift day because it's wet, but ideally, to me, when you're learning,
do.
No, I know.
Like they go, I can't put any smoke out. It's almost like the argument about there's no TV coverage. I'm not going to practice day.
No, my favourite one is I can't drift on a wet day because my car's got a turbo. Yeah, how many times I've heard that? It's just like, no, I can't control it when it comes on boost. It's like, you got bigger issues if you got that as a problem.
Your turbo's too big.
I've heard that from so many different people from so many different places. Like, no, won't go on the wet because my car's turbo. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, so yeah, drive to get used to your conditions and drive as yeah, just drive as much as possible. But yeah, sort of back to the original point where that is just find a car that's has the support to do what you want to do. Like, don't go crazy with some of your obscure Lexuses and things like that. Yeah, they're rear drive, but long term you're probably going to be changing chassis at some stage, and your basic upkeep. Drive within your means with what a car costs you, but also think about what your ongoing costs with that sort of car are. You might be able to get a KE70 Corolla for $300 that's rusted out, but good luck finding a diff.
Wish.
Good luck finding a diff or something like that that's isn't worth 5 times what you paid for the car and things like that. So, because all these old dudes are hoarding all these old parts.
Expensive.
Like Edie's backyard.
Especially... No, my backyard's cheap. It's for pure junk.
Dry's giving me crap for saying your turbo's too big. And my 3076 on the SR was a handful to drive because I didn't have the skill level to drive a turbo that big and that lazy on a car like that. So, or nuts big enough. So, yeah, don't go too crazy too early. Plus, just wear and tear on that sort of thing too.
Yeah, especially rare cars, because things like funny thing like an Aristo, Aristo, because they have a Lexus variant here, but an Aristo with a 2J, again the same friend that we are talking about before, he had a water pump failure, and in so you think, oh yeah, it's 2J, you should be able to order a replacement water pump, but it ended up being a very obscure, specific part, and it wasn't even available here. Like, you couldn't put on one from a Supra, you'd actually had to put one from another Aristo, and the only one he could find was in New Zealand. But luckily he was able to repair that, but it took him a little while to figure out he could repair it. So it's that sort of thing that would keep you off the road, and again, you would lose your track time, or you lose experience in that car. And that's what I think the biggest thing is. When you're starting off, you want experience. You want to get used to the feeling of drifting, and just even like getting into drifting, because it took me ages to figure it out. I think it was like the first track day, I just kept spinning out. I couldn't figure out how to actually get it to slide properly, and you just need experience, I think. Unless you're like one of the stupidly talented guys. Like, I remember Jake, who was in Canberra. When I got into the car with him the first time, I think he said it was like his first or second track day, but he picked it up super quickly. It was crazy. Like, you gave him a little bit of advice, and then he would be like, oh yeah, that's good, and he'd nail it and he'd figure it out. And it's really annoying when you meet people like that, because they're drifting really well, and then like at the points it's like, all right, well, you kind of just need to practice now because you've got the basics down, and you just need to sort of get more experience so you can understand these different situations and react differently. But yeah, it's still, again, that is an experience thing. You need the knowledge of what things could happen at one situations.
Yeah. And yeah, so as EG said, just as much track time as possible, and that's just getting seat time and working out how you can make it work. You can have the craziest car, but if you can't afford to keep getting out on track, then you've sort of it's a little bit redundant. You're not learning to drift if you've got a cool drift car and can't afford to drive. So yeah, I think that sort of from a driving point of view, that sort of sums up your basics for getting on track with that. I think Steve, our guest, is gonna mic drop it for tonight. We might roll into a quick chat about some of the sim drifting and getting a feel for it from there. But I think most of our basics, I think we covered pretty well for just getting out on track for your first time.
Hopefully. Feel free to ask questions
If you knew,
even.
or if you get some of the
Yeah.
guys who have messaged us privately in the past, if we haven't answered your questions, then just hit us up and we can either readdress it at some stage or point you in the right direction. We sort of know people all over the country now, so we can sort of point you in the right direction. But I think Steve's he's gonna mic drop us now.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you guys later. Have fun.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye.
What a douchebag.
Can't believe he left us again. He always does
I know.
this.
He's not reliable, is he?
No, he's just not. So yeah, I guess in regards to getting as much seat time or steering time as possible, any form of driving is good, really. And yeah, it goes and anything of go-karting, street driving, legally but hard, just getting a feel for cars in general, and then things like your sim drifting is definitely a good place to start to get your basics right.
I'm still struggling with that stuff.
Yeah, but it's just again, it's having an understanding of how things work
Crazy.
and sort of getting a basic understanding of just driving, I guess. So
Because it kind of is similar to sim drifting. It doesn't really relate to me like the way how I drive because I just can't. It doesn't react the way that I feel it should react. So I don't know how you think about it, but the only way I can get it to work is if, like what Steve said, just think of it as a game, and then I can okay, so it's nothing like real life, and I just drive it like a game, and then I can get it to do things. But it's like I'm switching between two different modes. Like I'm not in a driving simulator. I'm in a car game when I play the Sims.
yeah, I don't know.
You don't feel that way? I know other people say no, it's the same, and I just can't
no,
feel it.
I sort of get what you're saying, and there are definitely things that like you can't feel the front end grip through one of these steering wheels. Like you got to turn in, and if you do it all way too aggressive, without sort of learning what the game does, and you can sort of get to that point where your muscle memory gives you enough. You sort of know that I can only turn it this much because if you can just yank the wheel way too many times, but because you can't feel the front grip like you can in a car and feel it understeering through your bum, you can do too much sometimes. So you do have to finesse it a little bit, but once it's sliding and you just get a feel for what your hands are doing and just some throttle and learning things like dipping the clutch to stay close to somebody and left foot braking and little things like that, more so from a tandem point of view, is little things that are worth trying. And hey, if you're kind of worried about running into the back of somebody, it's a good place to start, because if you do run into somebody's door, you haven't done any damage. But for your more advanced techniques like your clutch dipping and that sort of thing, to me it's a really good place to start. But yeah, I get what you say. Like you can't come flying down the front straight at somewhere and then try and hook the car in and hope it's going to work. You've got some learning to do as to how the car in game reacts. But your sort of basic principles of all of it is really, really, really similar. So, and when I say like, one of the guys in the comments is saying that you can feel understeer through his wheel, but it's not. It's that immediate feeling. Rather than you've got to feel it through your hands, you're not feeling it through your bum like you are, or through your body like you are in a when you're doing it in real life.
I think it's like the drag you feel. Is that what you're talking about when you're understeering?
Yeah, or just the fact that you've hoped that it's going to turn and your body is still feeling itself move straight ahead, where when you're sitting stationary at a desk throwing around a steering wheel that's moving and you've got no sense of motion at all, you don't feel it. Like you don't have that, though you're missing that sense of feel through your body. So yeah, little things like that I can understand where you probably struggle a little bit to get a feel for it. But once the car's sliding, I'm imagining you don't have too much trouble on the games.
Yeah, I don't have a 900-degree wheel as
Yeah.
well. I've only got one that goes 7, whatever the. I don't even know
Not even a full 360.
how much. No, it
Oh,
goes
yeah, that's
to like.
yeah. So you not even like 540 or something.
Is it?
No,
I
no,
don't even
sorry,
know.
sorry, not even
Oh,
540.
yeah,
like,
it doesn't rotate.
yeah,
It doesn't. Not even like 280 or something like that.
yeah. So,
280,
but does it have feedback either?
275. It's got feedback, yeah. No feedback is.
No, sorry.
I played with no feedback as well.
But I don't mean feedback as in like the steering wheel shaking. I mean, does it fight you back to center or past center, or is it just springs?
Oh no, it's not springs. It's force feedback, yeah. So there's a motor in it, and it's pushing you back. It is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would imagine that for every tiny little motion you're making, it's making a big impact on the front wheels. So that's not really
Yeah, I
ideal.
get that, but that's not. I don't feel that's the issue because I've used Connor's wheel, and that was a 900-degree wheel, and that doesn't. I have the same experience on that wheel. The braking is the worst part. I think the steering is. It just doesn't steer like I feel it should.
Yeah, fair enough.
And that's one of the things I asked you about is like, not so much the steering, but like, can you actually braking drift? Because I can't get it to brake drift very well at all.
I mean, like going in faster than pitching the car forward under brakes to get it to step out.
Yeah, so like I think it might be the finesse. Like you need to be really light.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but
I have
that all
no
comes,
idea.
that comes down to how the cars are set up in game and things like that too. Like some of the older school games I learnt to drive on, like R Factor, the brake balance is really funny. Like for what those guys who designed that mod like doing and things like that. So there are little things like that as well. Like I'm sure if you change the brake bias in the settings on that, you'd probably find that you'd be able to do the things more so that you want to do. But again, it's like a real car where, or I guess even more than a real car, where you've got things like your brake bias adjustment that you can do, and you can change diff ratios and stuff on the fly and things like that that you wouldn't do in a normal car. So you've also got to look into that sort of thing before you go too crazy. Most of the base setups are pretty good to do a standard handbrake drag in and the car just to sort of sit on lock as you drive through a course. But when you try and do some of that more advanced stuff like you're talking about, then yeah, it's a little bit harder. But yeah, look, even driving simulators, even things like FR Legends on the phone and stuff with the battle modes and stuff, it just you get a feel and an idea for risk and consequence and things like that by doing that sort of thing. So again, it's not a bad place to learn as well. Like in that game, you're hitting walls and it costs you money to fix your car. So like you're learning, risk
and
and
the more you modify it,
the more
the
expensive.
more it costs you. Yeah, it goes up so much.
So as stupid as some of this sounds, like it really does teach you some of the values in that.
Yeah.
Some of the comments like
FR Legends is interesting. So yeah, I couldn't get that as well. That game I couldn't get, but then I did the same sort of thing. Just don't think it's real driving and play it like a game. Like, oh yeah, okay, and it made more sense then.
Do you know what I finally realized with that game recently? Is that when you're off the accelerator, it's still accelerating. Once you get up to speed, and like I will let completely off the throttle for ages, it's still like wheel spinning and driving. Where if I did that in in a real car, it would just sort of eventually fairly quickly straight.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's in the drift still.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you can there's some funny spots where like you want to straighten up, because
to sort of tuck underneath
just no, like when you're playing practice, you know how you drive around like Minami, you go back up and instead of like drifting up, because otherwise you just blow through tires. I think you go through 6% tires every drift section, and if you keep doing all the way around, it's like 10%. So you get like 10 laps, and like all your tires are cooked. So if you just drive around normally, then you don't cook your tires.
Yeah.
But so I try and straighten up, but it takes ages for it to go from like a drifting state to a non-drift state.
Yeah.
Even when the throttle off. But usually I don't throttle off. I just use the brake, so it'd be like in-game left foot braking.
Yeah, but that's what I started realizing recently with that. For sort of the guys chatting in the comments, when I've talked about sort of some of the stuff with the feedback in the steering wheel, it's all stuff that I can feel and understand now, but it's all stuff you learn within the game. And I think for anybody who's done something for long enough and gets good at it, you got to be careful of how complacent you get about that. It's sort of, oh no, it feels great, and it's like, well no, you're super used to it. If you end up on something that's better or worse, you start to realize what the either the shortcomings or the advantages of the setup that you have are, and if you're having to relearn some of that stuff, and the fact that some people just have some of their setups completely wrong and with weird feedback on and things like that. So that's more what I'm talking about. And yeah, you realize how quickly when you play those sort of games and you can bust out hours and hours on it so quickly, lap after lap, how quickly you learn some of the things that you learn and where your turning points and things like that are, and that for some of them you don't have perfect feedback on them. You just get so used to it that it's muscle memory more than the feedback you're actually getting through the steering wheel. I still get made fun of because people say that I started with a pro car, but the reality is I didn't start with a pro car, and in the first couple of years, 12 months of me driving, I had borrowed a few mates' cars and driven a few different basic cars. Always fairly well set up with a lock diff and an okay handbrake, but yeah, I didn't start in.
I think it's because you never had a shitter. You never had that.
Did you ever see my S14 before?
Nah, that's still like a semi-decent car. You can start off with like a Corolla or like an R31.
That stuff was
or
all
like
all that stuff was more expensive.
Falcon.
Okay, a Falcon maybe.
Prelude.
But the reality is the Prelude. The other cars, by the time I got into drifting, were more expensive than buying an S14. Now S14s have gone up again now, but like as soon as those became trendy because they were beginner drift cars, people were paying too much money for that crap. They've sort of gone back down again now, but that's because they're, I guess down this direction they're fairly rare. Queensland, you seem to pull R31s out of every backlot in Queensland seems to have a R31, but yeah, I didn't start in something retarded. I had a S14 with a leaky bloody stainless manifold and a 4.3 diff and coilovers.
Oh, did you have a spaghetti manifold like a
it came with a spaghetti manifold, so
yeah, those things crack all the time.
Yeah, so
irritating.
Yeah, I didn't start with anything that crazy. So and just
how much experience did you gain in that car? So I guess it would be
a lot.
Not so much time, but like how many track days did you go to before
I was driving at least 2 to 3 times a month on Figure 8. I was a member of both Driving Sports and Australian Drift Club in the first 12 months of me driving, and every event that had Figure 8 on, I was at. The guys who were helping look after the car at that stage had my car in there almost every week, so that if it cracked a bloody hard water line, that got replaced so I could drive that weekend. Did rear arms so I could go straight to the track and go drive. Things like that. Yeah, I was driving basically every single. I was taking days off work to. I think there was a Friday night. It was a rarity, but there was a Friday night driving sport event that was Figure 8 only, and no spectators. And I took the afternoon off work because I wanted to go drive that. I just didn't miss Figure 8 days for that 12 months. And
so it was like 4 or 5 hours every week almost. So
sort of every 2 weeks, I would say. So
That'll be 8 hours. No, say 10 hours a month. So about 120 to 150 hours
Yeah.
a year. In a year,
Yeah.
and then you moved on.
Yeah, and then I went a little bit more crazy, and the car stayed with standard lock and got a bit more power. When I say a bit more power, I think I was driving at like 240 kilowatt or something on standard lock, and then
Heaps.
yeah, no, it was a lot of power. And when I went to Wakewood,
That's like, I know this 250 is like the standard sort of power these days in Sydney.
yeah,
Whenever I talk to people up there, yeah, it seems like no one's under 200 these days.
but this was this is almost coming on 4 years ago now. But you
Yeah.
sort of start to realize that with that sort of power, unless you're willing to enter, like EG and his mates, that all that happens is you get to the end of the gear that you want to enter in really quickly, unless you're crazy or not crazy enough. If you're willing to keep plucking gears until you make it to the corner, and that's sort of where I'm starting to get to with my driving. But there's still a lot of people who sort of get up to that speed really quickly because they got a whole lot of power, and then slow down and then enter at whatever revs they want to be in the gear they want to be in for that entry, rather than continuing to grab gears as they make it closer and closer to the corner. But yeah, I did that first 12 months, and again, because of the sporting background, you train every day for the sport. So whenever I could drive, I was out there driving.
Yes.
And I drove a lot in that first 12 months, and then once the car got unreliable, that killed me more than anything, because I had this fancy shiny car that was always broken, and I didn't get as much seat time. So, and that was also when the car was still street registered, and I could just load. I had roof racks for the 14. I'd put two wheels on the roof and two wheels in the back seat, and then all my tools in the boot of the 14, and just drive to Eastern Creek, and it was easy. So stop out at Smithfield and change the tyres and do an oil and filter change at the workshop beforehand, and just around the corner to Eastern Creek. So a lot of driving to start with, and that was starting from basics. And it's funny when you start to do the silly stuff like I did, and you think about the time that you were driving, and then how much you start to miss because of decisions to try and keep up with the pack or keep up with the trend or whatever, when ideally I should have spent part of the money that I was spending on a second car to be able to maintain driving as often as I was. But in saying that, in the first 12 months, I rarely tandemed.
Yeah, okay. But that's like your beginner phase anyway, so yeah, it's not really something you should force yourself. Like, I think you'll naturally progress to that proximity sort of thing. So you'll get used to judging where you'd be and getting there, and then eventually you'd judge where yourself should be with another car, and then you'd get there. So that's where you should be practice tandeming, not in comps. Like, you shouldn't need to put pressure on organisers to make sure there's tandem practice, because there's lots of people in practice that enjoy tandeming one way or another. So just need to find that sort of person that is comfortable. So, but that's sort of a bit further down when you have a bit more experience, because you need to be able to judge them as well, understand their movement. If they're in a really bad spot and you think it's a bit too risky, because you can both wipe yourself out, you can both wipe out, and that'll be it could be as severe as like you hurt yourself, or it could just be your car's like completely wrecked and you build a new one. So that's one thing I think people miss, that step of when they start to do tandems, they need to be able to understand and read the car in front of them or behind them, and where to go as well, how to escape, how to minimize the amount of damage that you could cause to the person in front or behind or wherever. Like, it's experience, and the more experience you get, the easier you start to understand. Hopefully,
Yeah, and it's I
some
guess
people just don't get it.
and it's just setting yourself little challenges. Like I still like going on figure eight, and I guess now that I've got experience, I probably seem like a massive dick, and I sort of am. But it's fun to sort of go out there and you sort of start predicting what the dudes in front of you are going to do. And if you got somebody who's super irate, you sort of avoid them completely. But if some of the crappier guys or guys who are learning are still getting a feel for what they're doing, you sort of push up on them, but not go super close. And you sort of start to judge by the way the car's reacting, whether or not they're going to spin and do all that. And it's a good another dimension of driving to learn because, you know, being able to pull laps of figure eight can pretty much do it in my sleep now in most cars, but sort of anticipating what somebody else is going to do and when they're going to make a mistake is another skill to learn, and you can sort of start to learn and push some of yourself with some of that. So even on a figure eight night, I'll tend to start getting a little bit carried away and start pushing up on people that maybe I shouldn't, but sort of at that stage you've got your muscle memory in for doing the track itself, and then it's sort of predicting what other people around you are doing and being able to react and change your driving to, you know, either not to avoid a hit or get past them or be able to sit on them as they do laps.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's always fun too. But that's as a driver setting yourself a challenge and not just staying within your little comfort window.
But again, this is when you've got experience, not so much.
Yeah, but it also depends on
beginner thing.
But I guess
it would be a different beginner phase.
Yeah, like I was hugely competent, and some of my results at High Tech in the year that I drove a full season of High Tech on figure eight showed that I was a great buddy figure eight driver. But as soon as I went to Tassie, I realized how crappy a driver I was. So like, you know what I mean? Like you can end up as a great driver on one track, but once there's a different skill set used, then yeah, a lot of that goes out. It goes out the window. So it is, yeah, becoming versatile. But if you are stuck with, the same track that you're bored of, then it's continuing to set yourself challenges so that aspects of your driving continue to improve, even if you are inexperienced around more than, I guess, the 3 or 4 corners that is the track that is my home track. But yeah, getting a feel for other things. But I think that's sort of covers us for sort of getting into the driving. One of the groups that I didn't cover
mostly
earlier
yeah
was there are events being run up at Townsville at the sort of half permanent, half street course that the V8 Supercars run up there. There is some events going up there, as well as I think Cairns a little bit, or Cairns used to have some events. So some of the more obscure places do have some events going on up in Queensland.
Because I think Kev, one of our last guests, does training on that section as well in Townsville. I think I've seen posts from him up there. That's not I think it's driver training, but it's I think he uses that.
Yeah, I think that's where that is in the park with the half permanent course. I think they get a couple of days a year there, so there is that sort of stuff around too. So it really is just keeping an eye on Facebook more than anything else, or if you do see something pop up on Instagram, ask questions and find out.
There was like a obscure track. It was not even a track. It was a skid pan in Wagga as well. I think people were talking about that, but it's you can only run one person at a time, but it's quite cheap. It's just a big skid pan, and then there's sometimes I have events in Dubbo as well. I think ADC was trying to run an event there one day.
Yeah, ADC was trying to run an event there, but it got a little bit hard. But yeah, they do run Toyota Nats there.
Yeah, so. Yeah, and I think even Blake takes his car there just to do the Motorcana, but he pretty much drifts the whole course. So there's other events where you can sort of as long as you keep within their sort of rules, you can get more experience.
Yeah, and in Sydney you can
But
go to the Twilight rallies at the
yeah,
drag strip and you can skid it.
yep,
I think they narrowed it up to stop some of the boys from hanging off Wisefab too much in some spots. But yeah, look, there's lots of places to do it. You've just got to sort of keep your ear to the ground if you're at some of your more obscure locations or you're far away from a track. There are sort of driving events you can get away with practicing some oversteer techniques and things like that. But if you want to be with guys who are specifically drifting, then yeah, keep an eye out for those events on Facebook and stuff like that. Because yeah, those events will only give you sort of you'll reach your limit fairly quickly with some of them, or it'll take you a long time to reach your limit at those events because you just don't get the amount of time being able to practice. Um, I think
the
your Twilight
the
rallies and stuff, you get 5 runs
yeah.
or something like that. So if you purely go to those to try and hone your drifting skills, you're just not gonna, reach a competency as quick as you'd like. So,
Yeah, and like the Motorcanas in Canberra, they only you get 12 runs a Motorcana, I think, and they're about 30 seconds each. But the event itself isn't that expensive, but you're there in line waiting, and spending 6 hours of the day there, just getting those sessions in. But one thing, I don't know if we should or need to cover is tires when you're a beginner.
yeah,
Because I, just to mention quickly, I got told that you have to run semi sleeps at the front. And then for a long time, I didn't do that until I entered an event and they said, you should run. So I listened to these guys and I was semis on. I struggled real hard. But I think balance, is the better thing. So if you can run the grip level that, you can afford, and well, it's hard to explain
yeah, no.
because
So
every time's different.
yeah, I guess so. Personal experience, I'd always run. Yeah, I think I'd always run some sort of performance tire on the front. Uh, but with the 350, I bought cheap Chinese tires, and that was probably the wrong decision. But I wanted to go for a sort of, as you were going to say, like a more balanced setup front to back, and you sort of don't want to go super cheap with the front because some of your Chinese tires are absolute junk and have no grip at all at the
Yeah,
front. So like zero turn in, especially with a welded diff. So the turn in
yeah,
was
that's
was
right.
yeah was total rubbish. Um, but going crazy and putting super grippy tires on the front, especially tires that are super soft and um, yeah, it's I guess
Yeah, I think when you
it,
talk about balance, it can be different tires front to rear, but it's more like balance for your driving, and I guess you can afford as well. But initially, when I started drifting, I got the scrap tires from tire shops, and they're generally, if you treat them right, they'll treat you right. So they'll just charge you for fitting because, they need to throw the tires out anyway. Um, and if you go through, some places will let you go through the scrap pile, and then you can sort of pick out nice ones. I usually go for pairs, and I don't generally pay for the tire itself like a second-hand tire. Um, but one of the things that puts the tire shops off is if you go through the pile and you mess it up, because sometimes they'll actually have it stacked really neatly, and if you go through and destroy their sort of pile or just spread it out everywhere, then they say don't come back, like they won't let you through the tires. So you need to sort of make sure you, be nice to them, and they'll probably look after you. And you get some nice scrappies as well. Like I've got some really nice,
yeah, and I think, but I guess that's the thing to be careful of
rules and
when you
kits.
sort of
Yeah,
when you're talking scrappies, they're not always complete junk. Like when I first bought my first set of, I guess, spare skid wheels, I had hard, crappy sort of scrap tires on. I was like, oh, it's already got tires on it. I'll go and smash them, and they just fell apart within a couple of
Yeah.
laps of figure eight and they just chunked everywhere and flew everywhere, and that's sort of the gamble you take with it. Where if you depending on what sort of limited space you've got and how far you're traveling and things like that. Like if I was driving anywhere further than say Wakefield and I had limited space, I would be taking all sort of brand new or like fairly fresh looking scrap tires that, well, I guess I wouldn't call them scrap tires, I call them second hand um, tires that are good, still sort of soft, at their original sort of compound, that haven't been sitting in a scrap pile or been, sunbaked on a car for years and worn right down to the tread indicators, because you're going to end up wasting a whole lot of time and a whole lot of space changing tires because you've gone super cheap, of course, unless you've got the space to carry them and you're getting them for free. But for me personally, after that, I've pretty much always driven on brand new tires, cheap tires, but brand new tires, purely for the life side of
Yeah.
things.
It's predictable as well. So if you're learning and you get like a really nice set of Federals or Kenders, and then you wear through the rest of that, and then you get another set of I think I got Rockstones once, and it might not be the tire, but it could be just because of being sitting on a car for 10 years, and then I've picked them up. They were the slipperiest things ever, and when you go from like something that's really nice to something that's really bad, you lose the consistency, and then you have to drive around it. So it's really hard trying to conserve money. But ideally, if you had a bit of a budget for tires and you're practicing, then you'd want to get the same sort of tire, and that way it makes practicing easier. Or you just be aware that these tires are different every time, and you need to learn to adjust. So it's all good experience because it's all getting on the track, but you just need to be aware that all the tires, just because the tread's got this much left in it, it's going to be the same as this other tire which had this much tread.
And in saying that too, like the last Wakefield day I did in the 350, and I was down on power because I'm not nice to cars. I used a pair all day, so you're looking at I guess $120 ish in tires for the day. So it all comes down to the sort of car you've got and all that sort of jazz. So don't go. Yeah, if you're gonna go spend $100,000 on a car and then you put second-hand tires on the rear and all that sort of stuff, it seems a bit confusing to me. You've got enough money to pay for good tires, but then even in saying that, some of your second-hand and your scrappies on a R31 Skyline are potentially going to last all day too. So just experiment with it a little bit and find out what you like and what you're happy to use and what works for your budget. But know that to start with, you're probably going to end up experimenting a little bit. And as EG said, there's inconsistencies in using second handies, and if you're paying for second handies, I would recommend just buying new tires.
Yeah.
Like if they're
definitely.
charging you for them, just
I think fitting, I can understand being charged for fitting. So
fitting and scrapping you should be paying for, and if you get charged a little bit more for scrapping because there's bloody wires and stuff hanging out of them, then you got them for free. Don't have a whinge, but basic things like that, just
but I don't think you should pay for the tire itself, because generally they're gonna have to pay to get rid of those tires.
And so generally somebody's already paid to get rid of those tires. The customer who's
that's right.
have already paid for them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's, I think, just quickly, just to cover the tires off. I think that's ideally you want something balanced, but it really depends on your setup and how much you can afford.
Yeah, and I think some of that basic stuff we're going to try and get Stewie on at some stage, and I think he'll probably go through some of that stuff, how the front end reacts with the rear end when it comes to with tires and yeah, front end and rear end grip and things like that. So we'll get more into that, but yeah, in some ways now with most tire shops trying to get every dollar they can, you're probably actually going to find, unless you've got a good relationship with a place, that yeah, getting brand new tires is probably going to be easier. So yeah, and just consistency.
Yeah.
And you don't have to run FD pressures. Don't go crazy. Just run something that makes the car actually want to slide. So
Man, I'm like at Wakefield, what's his name? Prosnik. He was running 40 plus PSI or something.
yeah,
About that. And other people were running 11.
yeah, like crazy low.
Yeah.
I
And
don't-
then it was so different.
Yeah, so many people think that low tire pressures means you're going to put the car exactly where you want it to go. But my last trip to QR, I ended up bumping the pressures up fairly high and actually found the car very predictable, which I kind of liked, and it's something that I hadn't really done too much before, and it's something that yeah, with a lower powered car now, I'm definitely looking more and more into. It's your gear ratios and all that sort of stuff play more of a role, and it gets a whole lot more advanced than just your tire pressures. So
But it does, I've seen it make a difference. But then I think you need to understand how it makes a
why,
difference.
yeah, how and why it makes a difference. Yeah, of course.
So I think generally, if you're a beginner, you'd run sort of the normal, whatever you're running normally, like on the roads. If you're running 30-ish PSI, then just leave that in there. Maybe I might bump it up a bit. Yeah,
Well,
'cause that's what you're used to.
yeah, and that's what your manufacturer specs are for optimal grip for that car.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, like once they get hot, they'll be a little bit higher and things like that. But it depends on how much you're hot lapping the car, and it gets super advanced. But you also got to think somebody like your Prosnik's car probably has a whole lot of mechanical grip, where some of the dudes who are running super low pressures have probably barely done any R&D on their car. It's poorly balanced, and a good cover for that is just to bump your pressures right down, because you don't have a whole lot of mechanical grip. So. But that's yeah something we'll try and get into with Stewie at some stage.
It's interesting because I run like something crazy whenever I go to Minami. I bump up the tire pressures. I think it gets up to 60 psi when I run Minami. So, but then if it's a different course, then it's around 30 psi or 35. So, and I just feel comfortable that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess in saying that, it's just playing with that sort of thing. Like, be like, all right, I'm gonna have a session where I bump my fronts right up and drop my rears right down, see what the car does. Switch it around, do the
Yeah.
opposite, bump the rears right up, drop the fronts right down, have a play with it. Any of that information that you learn is good information. None of it's bad information, because you've experimented and you've sort of gone out there with the intention of finding out. So again, I guess as a beginner, or even as somebody, if you haven't learned any of that because you haven't bothered doing any of that sort of learning yourself, is going out and actually having a play and not just listening to what so and so told you to do, and you should be.
I think that would be like an intermediate sort of level.
Oh, yeah, of course, but
yeah.
I'm not saying super beginner, but like I'm even saying some of the guys who've been driving a long time and never thought to actually have a play with that sort of thing. The whole set and forget sort of culture that most people are like, because they don't want to have a play with some of that stuff, is yeah definitely worth experimenting with. So yeah. For everybody who keeps asking, the 350 is still dead because it's got it's running, but it's got some weird electronic throttle issue. So I didn't want to put pressure on anybody to have it fixed up for the North Circuit. And honestly, I'm glad my car wasn't running for North Circuit, because that was way too hot.
Yeah.
We didn't speak about.
Yeah, you checked that out, didn't you? No.
It was extremely hot, and people weren't putting thicker oils in their cars like they should have, and a few people have ended up with rod knock or blown motors and lots of fancy things like that because ambient air temperature in the shade was like 45 degrees.
Yeah, it looked. I watched a live stream from there, and the guy that was doing the live stream was just like dripping in
Yeah,
sweat.
it
It
was.
was so hot.
Yeah, it was disgusting. I watched from in the car on the hill for up on the last corner for a while. The grass was super long, and I sort of had the car running with the AC going, and I'm like, oh, it smells a bit burny, like green stuff burning. And then I reversed back a little bit, and the grass would have been like a good buddy 20 centimeters tall, and there was a big black patch under where my exhaust was. So um, watched that for a bit, then went down to turn 2 and 3, got out of the car with an umbrella, and yeah, it was hot as hell. Went down to the pits and talked some crap for a while, which is standard for me, and yeah, it was like at least 40 in the pit garages in the shade. So a lot of cars heat soaking
Wow.
and having trouble, and then yeah, a few guys with bottom end knocks and blow by and all sorts of crazy stuff purely because yeah, I'm not sure if you didn't make sure you put thicker oil in there, your car was basically running water through as lube because it wasn't doing shit. So
Yeah, it looked hot.
yeah, so yeah, definitely not ideal, but we'll see what comes of the event. And yeah, I'm not. I think the turnout was less than what they were hoping, and it was a very expensive event to run. So we'll see if it happens again. At this stage, the guys who have gone out and done the event are lucky because it might be the last one for 6 years again. But we'll wait and see what comes of it. But hopefully, if they get another one, that hopefully they can get something like a Bathurst weekend or something when the circuit racers don't really want it. Um, and it's yeah, the temperature's cooler because that time of year in Blacktown, yeah, it just sucks.
Yeah,
So
I think they did well just because of the time of the year.
yeah, but
It's such a
the sad part is
bad, like, as in,
the track didn't the
yeah,
track did nothing to help out though. Like in regards to that,
no,
they charged more than retail price for a day that was going to be a write-off for them anyway. So yeah,
yeah, because they wouldn't have any. Because a lot of people on holidays, but that holiday is more like a family
yeah.
or
So people
not
have
really.
yeah, most people have gone away, like will have taken the family
Yeah,
somewhere or whatever. So yeah, but overall, pretty good
yeah,
event. Some good driving. People looked more and more confident as the day went on. So and then some of the old school guys who hadn't driven in a while sort of showed up and looked really good from the outset. So
yeah. I heard Ferds turned up in the end,
yeah,
which is cool.
Ferds and Jimmy were there. Tom Boban in ADC S14 showed up. He hasn't driven for a year and looked good from first lap out. So were a lot of the guys who have been driving heaps lately, but sort of your slower, your sort of mid third gear and second gear stuff looked like they struggled to start with, and then sort of got down for the party a little bit later in the day as they sort of got a feel for the higher and higher speed that is sort of required on that sort of track. So yeah, overall not a bad not a bad event, but yeah, just poor timing, and I think it might end up hurting in the long run as to getting another event. So, but we'll wait and see.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
South Circuit.
Yeah, we'll wait and see what happens, I guess. Um, anything planned for next week at this stage? Should we be trying to get? We might try and get one of the guys who are
Yeah, we'll
done
try and get guests.
from Summernats.
Yeah, well, I'll send a couple messages around
Yeah,
and see. Haven't decided, and because I think we need to plan a bit better somehow.
yeah,
somehow.
yeah, we do need to plan.
But
a
we
bit
said
better.
that last year as well,
Yeah,
and
but we're males,
then
so
we just yeah,
we're males.
it still worked.
Yeah, it still
Yeah,
worked. And then
yeah,
what we might also do, I might message one or two of the New Zealand guys and see if any of them want to come on after round one of D1 NZ. The worst part is our timing isn't great. They're 2 hours ahead of us, so yeah, it's like midnight there now. So, but we'll see if there's one. There's one.
yeah. They come for like
I think there's one that'll potentially come on. So we'll try and grab him on after the first round. So.
okay.
But yeah, so 2019, we're still in full swing. We don't take weeks off except for when we don't have internet or one of us is actually fully away, or if I'm away because
Yeah.
more so than anything. And yeah, we'll slowly get around to doing everything we say we're gonna do. But hope everybody has.
Shirts.
Anybody who's still off work until Monday, keep enjoying your holiday, and um, entries to the Adam LZ event. I think there's still expressions of interest for. I think there's 3 days during the week that he's driving. So I think the first day, like the main event on the weekend, is full with a waiting list. But I think the other 2 days, Luke and T are still going through deciding on drivers. So there's that big one, and then the Australia Day thing down at the Bend. So,
Talents.
so
Yeah.
get on that and
Really want to go.
keep an eye on that. So yeah, and then yeah, we'll try and keep up to date with news leading into the start of the year. If there's anything new happening or anything like that, we will keep you guys up to date with all of that. And I would imagine soon there'll be more and more announcements coming out of FD and D1 and everything as people get settled for next season and more cars are sort of revealed. So we'll stay a little bit up to date on some of that stuff too. So yeah, anything else, EG?
No, I don't think so. I think that's probably enough
Yeah, and so
shit talking for this week.
for this week. So yeah, so we'll catch you guys next week. We should have a guest, and we'll try and announce that as early as possible, and you guys can get questions and stuff in if you have anything to ask. So yeah, we'll catch you guys next week.
Cool. See you guys.